What pisses me off the most is these companies making so much money and misleading people, selling them dreams that are just never going to come true. It's an absolute scam. Whether these companies know they're misleading people or they're just not educated on the topics, today we are going to discuss all of that, and we are talking about the hottest topic in the industry at the moment, and that is a 12 volt system as good as a 24 or a 48 volt system? We're going to be debunking all the misleading truths, all the things that companies tell you to get the sale. My name is Keelan, I'm a qualified electrician, I'm qualified to make this video, and the idea is to educate and give you guys the tools to make the right decisions for yourselves to hopefully save you some hard-earned dosh, some cash, and hopefully some tears, so you can make the right call on what you guys actually need. Be careful though, I'm qualified, but doesn't mean that everyone on YouTube is. Anyone can grab a camera and make a video like this claiming to be a guru. I've got the qualifications to show for it, and I'm obsessed with this stuff. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the video and start discussing, is 12 volt systems shit, like everyone says they are? Are they a thing of the past? And is 24 and 48 the way of the future? Let's go. So to be able to cut through all the BS and make good decisions for yourself, we need to firstly deepen our understanding on what's a 12 volt system and what's a 24 volt system. And like I said, this same principle applies to 48 volt systems. Okay, so essentially a 12 volt system and a 24 volt system all depends on how it's either internally hooked up, because you can buy just a standalone single 24 volt battery, but for the purpose of today's video, I'm going to be simplifying everything. I'm going to be using the exact same batteries in both situations. They're 125 amp hours. It's just over 1500 watts, but I'm going to reduce that to 1500 flat just for the benefits of this. Normally it's a 12.8 nominal voltage, but I'm going to reduce that to 12. And both systems actually have 3000 watts each. So this is 3000 watts and this is 3000 watts. So you're probably thinking to yourself, Keelan, what's the difference between this and this? Now it's all to do with the way it's hooked up. Now, if you are going to hook these batteries up and you want to remain 12 volts, you would hook them up in parallel, and it looks a little bit like this. So that's one of your connections, and this is your other connection, your positive. So that's all it is. And between these 2 points here, your potential difference is going to be 12 volts. Now, to hook up a 24 volt system, we're going to be hooking them up in series. So parallel and series. I'm sure you've heard that before. So your connections are going to look like this. Okay? And between these 2 points here, you're going to have 24 volts. Just like that. Now, with this equation here, this is the only equation that you ever need to remember, is power equals voltage times current. Now we have the power, which is represented in watts. And for today's video, by the way, I could be using terms such as watt hours and very complex terms, but we're simplifying it and we're only going to be using voltage, amp hours and watts. That's the only thing that you're going to hear from me today, okay? So both systems are 3000 watts. That hasn't changed. Each battery 1500 times 2, 3000. The only difference is this system up here is 12 volts. This system down here is 24 volts. So using this equation, we have the wattage, so 3000 divided by 24. In this situation, we're going 3000 divided by 12. This actually equals 250 amp hours. That's how much capacity. And in this situation, it's 125 amp hours, right? So the difference is, if you parallel two batteries together, you're simply doubling the amp hours and keeping the voltage the same. In this situation, if you series two batteries, you're actually doubling the voltage, so you get 24 volts, but you retain the same amount of amp hours. So I hope that makes sense. The thing you have to remember though is they're both still equal in the amount of power that they have, and that's 3000 watts, or if you want to get testicle, 3000 watt hours. So we'll get rid of that for now. We understand that. This system here is 125 amps. This system here is 250 amp hours. So a few of the myths in the industry is that a 24 volt system is going to be lighter, it's going to take up less space, and that is simply not true. And as you can see here, I'm proving that. They're the exact same batteries, they weigh the exact same amount. The only thing that's changing is the way they're hooking up. So if you ever hear that in the industry, that a 24 volt system is actually going to be lighter, the bare bones of it, it's bullshit. Don't listen to it, it's bullshit. Now, the next little thing, little piece of bullshit that I hear, and I'm sorry for swearing a lot, I'm very passionate about this, but is this system here is going to outlast this system here. Now, that is majority of that statement is not true, and I'm about to show you why. So, say we have an air conditioner, and everyone loves talking about how long they can run their air conditioners for off-grid. So, let's make this really simple. We've got 2,000 watt air cons. They're pulling 2,000 watts. On this one, they're pulling 2,000 watts at 24 volts. And on this one, they're pulling 2,000 watts at 12 volts, right? So in this equation, if we do 2,000 divided by 12 volts, we're gonna get 166 amps, okay? That's what the aircon's gonna be pulling when it's cycling down. It's ramping up, it's trying to make your caravan as cold as possible. It's gonna draw this much power off your batteries. In this equation, we do 2,000 divided by 24. It's only gonna be drawing 83 amps. Right? So you're probably thinking, that's an 8 by the way. So you're probably thinking, Keelan, this one is going to outlast because that's only drawing 83 amps, where this is drawing 166 amps. You're wrong. Let's go back to the original point. By paralleling our batteries here, we're getting a 250 amp hour capacity. So this ratio here, 250 to 166, is the exact same that 83 amps pulling off 125 amp hour batteries, meaning these will pretty much run out of battery at the exact same time if you were to turn the aircon at the exact same time. So this does not necessarily mean you get more power, it's just a higher voltage. Now I will get into efficiencies and how this can be smaller cable, less losses, less volt drop, a lot of benefits later on, but for now let's just stick to the disadvantages of this setup, and we'll talk about the advantages a little bit later on. Let's talk about the next one. The one that I hear a lot is that a 24 volt system is actually going to be cheaper, cost effective wise, than a 12 volt system. Now that is partly true. Let's introduce a generic system here. So normally an air conditioner needs 240 volts to be able to run it. So you need an inverter. So let's draw an inverter into the situation right here. So that's an inverter. This is an inverter. Okay. This one here is going to be doing 12 volts to 240 volts. So 12 to 240. This one is doing only 24 to 240. This this inverter here is having to step up 12 volts 20 times. So let's talk about how much work the inverter is doing. So this is doing 20 times the work to transform 12 to 240. So 12 times 20 is 240. On this side, because this is double the voltage of this system, this air conditioner is only doing 10 times the amount of work to step 240 into 24 into 240. And by saying that, your inverter is actually going to be a lot smaller because the internals can be smaller. It's doing less work, so it requires less beefy componentry internally. That means it's going to be cheaper fractionally. And I've done a bit of research. I think I can get inverters for roughly $100 and $150 cheaper for a 3,000 watt inverter if I go to 24 volts, okay? So to summarize, your inverter is going to be smaller, it can be cheaper. This inverter is going to be a lot harder to find than this inverter. They are becoming more common. However, that inverter to replace is going to be harder to replace than this one here. It's going to be a little bit cheaper because of the componentry. And let's talk about something that no one tells you. So you've saved a bit of money here, but it's about to disappear. So on a conventional caravan system, you have things like lights, fridges, things that run off 12 volts. Now the simplicity of this system is beautiful. Out of the battery, normally you go through some fusing into say a switch to turn the appliance on or whatever. That switch closes, put power into your appliance. And normally all the appliances very commonly are 12 volts. Now, if we have 12 volt appliances down here, you're probably gonna say to me, Keelan, 24 volts into a 12 volt appliance is gonna blow the shit out of it. And you are correct. So you've got two options, right? Your first option, and this is the most common option if you spec a caravan to 24 volts, the manufacturer is gonna run all of your loads, 12 volt loads, through a converter. So what a converter does is transforms the 24 volts into 12 volts, which is safe for your appliances to use. And remember, going back to the point where I said you just saved 150 bucks on your inverter. Well, you've just spent 150 bucks on your converter. Okay, so this costs money. Basically, you're going to consume some of this, if not all of this, in putting one of these in, where you could keep it simple and just have 12 volts going into 12 volt appliances. Okay, the next thing is, sometimes some of the more luxury caravans, such as
High-Tech World, have up to 85% off sale, and with our discount code SKT, you can make that up to 90%. They're selling everything from bloody solar blankets, solar panels, lithium batteries, and we've even got bloody jump starters coming out the wazoo here. They're bloody red hot. They're going to be some serious bargains, guys, and now is the cheapest and best time to update any of your 12 volt gear. It's going to be the cheapest. Anyway, guys, jump on. It's only while stocks last. Grab a bargain.
Some of the more luxury caravans, such as Urban, I know that Urban for a fact, these guys actually get their hands on 24 volt appliances. So you don't need a converter anymore. However, this is a lot more rare and more expensive to get your hands on than a 12 volt appliance. A 12 volt light is, there's dime a dozen, but this will be more expensive, harder to get your hands on. If something ever happened to this appliance, very, very difficult to get your hands on, especially if you're up at Cape York. So this is a bit of an issue when it comes to 24 volt systems. Okay, we've spoken about this before. We had our 240 volt inverter go into our 240 volt appliances. Like I said, this is only doing 10 times the work and this is doing double the work. So this is going to be more efficient. But in this situation here, you're going to be losing. Normally, manufacturers just put a converter in and you're going to be losing all the efficiencies here because you're saving, you're not doing any work by stepping down the voltage here. You're going to be creating heat. You're still going to be like you're cancelling each other out effectively, is my point. By making the setup more complex, you're introducing more bits of equipment, and thus you're going to be doing your efficiency. You're going to be throwing it away. So that hopefully makes sense to you. Let's keep going and discuss some of the other disadvantages of a 24 volt system. All right, so like I said, your inverters might be cheaper. Let's say your solar controllers are also going to be cheaper, which I'll get into the charging side of things in a minute. So this is going to cost money, right? This is going to cost a little bit less money. However, when you purchase this from a caravan company, this setup, 24 volt system, they are going to charge you the same as a 12 volt, if not more, because of all this complexity, having to get different appliances, converters, different inverters. They're having to order stuff in for your caravan that is not just off their shelves that they put in 99% of caravans. And that's purely because 24 volt systems are still quite rare in the industry. 90% of the systems, the Offgrid systems, are going to be 12 volt. That means that this is going to be more expensive for a business to put in. However, if you buy all this equipment yourself and want to put in your own 24 volt system, you will save a little bit of money, I think. By saying that, I think 99% of people watching this will all go to a manufacturer or an auto sparky to get this installed themselves. I don't think many people are going to do this themselves. Right, the next thing that I'm going to talk about. So far, we've only shown the electricity going that way, but you're probably wondering, Keelan, where is my solar? Where is my alternator? How does that all work with the different systems? Explain that to me. So that's what I'm going to do now. So in the same situation, we've got, let's do the alternator first. Let's talk about that. So in Australia in particular, we have a lot of rainy days as much as we have sunny days, depending on where you are in the country. So alternator charge from your car. So actually, I'm not going to draw a car. I'm not the best at drawing cars. So anyway, I've just put an A there for alternator. Your alternator, at best, I've seen my alternator pump out 13.7 volts. And that's when it's nice and cool. That's as much as you're probably going to get out of an alternator in Australia. Volts, not amps. Idiot. 13.7. Normally you run that through your DC to DC charger. DC to DC charger, and for this one, it's going to be a 12 volt DC to DC charger. Say mine in particular 60 amps. Alright, so you've got 13.7 volts coming in. Normally a DC to DC charger will pump that up to like maybe 14.4 volts. at best. So that's like when the algorithm is demanding like a bulk charge in your battery system. With this instance, we've got 13.7 volts, and you're probably saying to me, 13.7 volts, Keelan, cannot charge a 24 volt system. The voltage is simply not high enough to actually charge the cells in this battery. And you are 100% correct. So this does not work at all. However, it can work. And that is by introducing a specialty piece of equipment that actually goes from 12 volts to 24 volts. Now, this is specialty. This is a lot harder to find. It's the same to why you have two tails coming in, two tails coming out than this, and harder to find. So again, like I said with the 12 volt loads, by having to introduce pieces of equipment in where normally they wouldn't even be required in a 12 volt system, just purely to make a 24 volt system practical and functional. So before I said they have to put a converter in to be able to transform 24 to 12 volts to be able to, your appliances to be able to cope with it. Now we're actually introducing another piece of equipment. I guess you normally would have a DC to DC charger, and the issue is with this, without getting too testicle with it as well, is that this can produce backfeeding issues, and then you have to introduce diodes, and I could go on and on about the potential issues that this could cause to your system. I've never done this as well. I'm just thinking of the potential issues that could arise. So you could actually have to introduce even more equipment into this to make this work, like isolators or a diode or some sort of electrical gate to stop backfeeding. So anyway, that's this side. Let's talk a little bit about the solar, because solar is the biggest thing in my opinion, and you guys know that I harp on about solar. So let's talk a little bit about the solar side of things as well. Okay, here we go. So essentially we're going to draw some solar panels over here. Both systems require solar panels. Now, the same reason that the alternator couldn't charge this 24 volt system, and it's easily going to be able to charge a 12 volt system, the same principle will apply with solar panels. So for a 12 volt system, generally speaking, we run 24 volt panels. That's very generic. That's the generic way of doing it. You can have 48 volt, even up to towards 100 volt panels, and going through a step down MPPT charger. However, generally speaking, this is what you'll find most times. So to be able to charge a 24 volt battery bank, we're going to have a higher nominal voltage of our solar panels. That means our solar panels can be 36, but the most standard would be a 48 volt panel. Now, these 48 volt panels obviously are feeding, mind that arrow, feeding electricity in. Normally, generically, we would have a solar controller. Now that would be in the form, my favorite is MPPT, so max power point tracking solar controller. You can get PWM, so pulse width modulating controllers. I really like this one for big solar arrays. So we've got our MPPTs here. And for this particular setup, we're gonna have a 24 volt MPPT, mind that. And in this situation, it's gonna be a 48 volt MPPT. Now, if you were to ask me, Keelan, and this is before I get into the advantages of all this too, because I know a few of you are sitting on the couches with bated breath, waiting for me to talk about the advantages of this, and trust me, they're coming. However, if you were to ask me, Keelan, which system would you like to work on out of these two? I would say it is way safer to work on this system than this system. This is a lot more dangerous. As soon as you up the voltage, you are creating danger. Now, what's deemed safe, anything under 30 volts. And for the average Joe Blow, I would deem this system unsafe to be able to work on. So that is another thing. If something happens out in the bush and you need your stuff to work and work properly, you can't go and fault find because it's deemed dangerous. By upping the voltage on your solar panels, you're adding danger in. Going back to the solar controllers, you do save a little bit of money on these solar controllers because they're not having to work as hard. You're delivering the voltage at a lot higher level, meaning, yeah, you don't have to work as hard. And I'm going to get into the advantages of that, like some partial shading. You're immune to shading, some shading, and immune also to the big bird shits, the pigeon flocks that are coming through. So I'll get into the positives in a minute, but I really wanted to touch on that danger. And like I said at the start, we are talking about 24 volt systems, but the same things apply to 48 volt. If you have a 48 volt system, I'd rather work on a 24 volt system, if not a 12 volt system. You can put your tongue on this. Yes, it's gonna hurt like hell, you put your tongue on this, it's gonna freaking near on kill you, rip your tongue off. But if you put your tongue on a 48 volt system, yeah, you'll weld your tongue to your teeth. Safety is a big factor as well. One thing that I'll touch on before I erase all this is the simplicity factor. So a massive disadvantage, so I should say a massive advantage of the 12 volt system is it's incredibly simple. So, you know, you've got your loads coming out, they're 12 volts. You don't need to put in converters or anything like that. It goes straight in there. You've only got three different voltages. You've got your panel voltage, which is 24. You've got your nominal voltage of 12.8 volts, and then you've got your inverter voltage of 240 volts. So you've got three different voltages. With a 24 volt system, in its most complex form, you could have 12 volts coming from your alternator, and then you've got it going into 24 volts to be able to charge your battery. And then for your inverter, you've got to step up through the inverter. So essentially you could have up to 5 different voltages in your system. So for troubleshooting, having different voltages, not knowing what pieces of equipment should be at voltage wise, it'd make it it's a nightmare. It's complex. And to be frank, I've always coined all of our systems on the fact that they're very, very simple systems, and simple things work really, really well. And call me traditionalist, call me old school, but for me, if I had to choose between a complex and a very simple system, I would choose the simple system every single day of the week. So yeah, so this could have up to 5 different voltages. This can have up to 3. So you pick which one you want to grab. You know, one's very simple, one's very complex, but I think the 12 volt system takes the cake in that regard. So like you're probably thinking, Keelan, there's got to be advantages of running a 24 volt system over a 12 volt system. Why would people do it otherwise? You know, and the answer is 100%. There is definitely some positives. So we'll rip into that right now and we'll explain the positives. So a massive positive, like I've harped on about volt drop in previous videos, and that all comes down to that efficiency. So the rough principles of volt drop is if you increase the current that's going through each cable, you're effectively going to be, you know, throwing your efficiencies out the window. You're going to get a lot of volt drop. So for example, this here, our appliance is 100 meters away, and say we want to draw, I don't know, we've got 40 amps going to the load. That's the load. It leaves the batteries at say 12.8 volts. It runs through this cable 100 meters. By the time it gets to this load, whether that's an aircon or a freaking whatever it is, you might be at 11.7 volts, and that's because your load is 40 amps. In this example right here, the 24 volt example, our load, because we are doubling the voltage, the same load is actually going to be 20 amps. And going back to that aircon situation, like I explained before, that's your load. It could be a light or whatever the frick it is. We're going to be leaving here at 24 volts, if not 25 volts. It's going to travel the same distance, 100 meters, but because it's a reduced amount of current, the load's reduced because you're increasing your voltage. You're actually going to retain, you know, this is a volt drop of almost, that's a whole volt drop, which is huge. Where here we might get to the end point and still be at 23.8 volts, you know. So that is a lot less losses. There's less eddy currents. There's less heat going through it because there's less amperage, and that's going to result in a lot more higher efficiencies. I hope that makes sense for everyone. And going back to this, if we double the voltage, where the power stays the same, if we double the voltage, we're halving our current. So like I said, that's the same load. You know, if you times 40 by 12.8 and you times 20 by 24 volts, it's going to become the same amount of power, the same amount of watts. You know, that's both equal in equation. So yeah, that is a lot more efficient to do it that way, which means, yeah, it's good for everything. It's good for everything. And the next thing I'll talk about is cable size, because a lot of people harp on about cable size. The reason I always tell people to beef their cable up so big here to all their loads is because of that volt drop situation, right? But if you're doubling your voltage, you don't have to have as big a cable. So say we've got a 40 amp load here. Let's not do that much. Let's just do 20 meters. That should be, I don't know, I would like 2 BNS. It gets confusing with all the different cable sizes. 30 mil cable, 30 mil flex. But if we've got say 20 amps here, because it's a lesser current, our cable size doesn't have to be that big, it can be 6. So that actually saves, and copper's quite expensive, and going back to the affordability of it, it will be a little bit cheaper to do a 24 volt system if you install it yourself, but it's such bullshit when people say it's cheaper when they get someone else to do it, because the person that's installing it or the caravan manufacturer is having to deal with all this complexity. They charge you the same amount, if not more, so you're not going to save any money, but you're definitely going to save weight. And I've had this conversation with Urban Caravans a fair bit. I reckon in a total caravan, if you were to have a 24 volt system over a 12 volt system, we might be talking 10, 15, 20 kilos of saving, which, you know, it doesn't really sound like a lot. You can be the judge on that, but the weight saving on the cable side of things is 100% a thing. The efficiency saving is 100% a thing. And to back up these claims that I'm making right now, I know it's backed by science, but have you ever wondered why, like, a transmission line on a power pole, like a big Western power pole, the cables are so small, yet that can power a whole city? And that is because instead of 24 volts, they're stepping their voltage up through transformers, sometimes up to 500,000 volts. By doing so, their current is reduced. So that 5,000 volts at freaking 10 amps, and then if you step that back up, that can become it's a massive load at that voltage. But that is the most efficient way to transport the electricity over long distances, by stepping up the voltage, and by doing so, you're reducing the current. And like I said, that's why the transmission wires, you know, that you see on the freeways run tiny wires, because their voltage is so freaking high. And like I said before, the higher the voltage, the higher the danger. So that is another thing. Another reason why this system is always going to be more efficient. So I spoke about inverters before, and I'm sure you remember when I said this is going to do 20 times the work, this is going to do 10 times the work to the inverter, right? So inverters are quite often known for being quite inefficient pieces of equipment, purely because you're trying to step up a voltage so freaking much. It's going from 12 volts to 240 volts. So nothing ever runs efficiently, especially inverters. You might notice in your caravan, if you just leave your inverter on and you don't have any 240 volt loads coming off it, you're still going to be using more power than if you had it completely isolated, completely switched off. And that is because the inverter, it's just sitting there, just on standby, transforming 12 volts into 240 volts AC, is using power. It's like a residual power loss that you get. And like I said, if the inverter's bigger because it's doing more work, it's definitely going to use more residual power just sitting there on standby than, say, one that is only doing 10 times half the amount of work. So that is another one, and that goes back to that efficiencies. So and when I talk about all this, efficiencies is the biggest difference between 24 volt systems and 48 volt systems and 12 volt systems. You're just gaining the efficiency. When companies say you gain power, you're reducing your space, you're reducing all this stuff, it's a load of wank. Don't listen to it, because that is not the case. All you're gaining is maybe the 1 amp here that you're gaining in, like, residual power loss. You're gaining that, maybe that 1 amp, you know, of power draw in your cables, because they're smaller, they're not creating as much heat because you're reducing your current. You're just saving 1 or 2 amps around the place, okay? So the way I want you to think about this is that, with all this being said, you're saving 1 to 3 to 4 amps, you know, amp hours, max, not even amp hours, over a long period of time. You're saving bugger all, right? It definitely is better. And now I bet you're begging the question, Keelan, is it worth it going from a 24 volt system from a 12 volt system? Is it worth the extra complexity? Is it worth the extra money when you pay someone to do it, a caravan manufacturer? Is it worth having an issue and not knowing how to fix it? Is it worth having an issue and not being safely able to fix it? These are all the questions that I would be begging to ask myself, and I'm about to get into the conclusion, and we're going to wrap this whole thing up. So essentially, guys, the differences that you're going to see is inefficiencies. But hey, if you run big enough cables in a 12 volt system, you're going to have just as much efficiencies. You still won't have as much in your inverters and your DC to DC chargers and your solar controllers, but them efficiencies that are different then are only going to be 1 to 2 to 3 amps. The rest is going to be the exact same. So like I said, it's apples for apples. I reckon you'll save 10, 15 kilos max on a system like that, and that's purely in that lower cable size. And it's going to be the same price, so it's not going to be any cheaper. So this system could end up costing you another few $1,000s. Is 15 kilos of weight worth a couple $1,000s? That's the question you've got to ask yourself, because let me tell you, the 1 to 3 to 4 amps that you're going to be saving in efficiencies through your inverter and your chargers, you know, that's the only difference. And you're going to get 15 kilo lighter setup, maybe. Depends on who's installing it, where they install it, what equipment they choose, but these systems could end up weighing the exact same amount. It's that close. It's not worth riding home about, and that is not worth riding home about as well. So you're going to pay a lot more money. Is that worth it? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. Let's conclude this thing. Let's conclude this video, because I've tried to give you guys a lot of information, and a few of you guys out there might have brain bleeds, but hopefully I've taught you something about the difference. Like I said, this is a complex task to explain this to you guys, especially people with limited knowledge on power systems. It's not your fault, because you definitely know a lot more about other stuff than me. This is just what I'm passionate about, and I like to show people this, but it's very difficult for me to actually explain it in a way that you guys can understand. So if you have understood anything today, please let me know in the comments. It encourages me to make more videos like this to help you guys and save you money. So to wrap this up, if you ask me the question, Keelan, you can pick this system or this system, what are you choosing? Which one is better? Now, I'm gonna choose this system every day of the week, but does that necessarily mean this isn't as good, if not better? Now, if you'd ask me which one's better, I would say this one here, 24 volt system is 100% better. However, it's only better for a certain amount of people. It's not better for everyone. Like I said, it's better because of this reason. You're not increasing your wattage, you're not getting a heap more energy out of your system, if not any. You're only saving on the efficiencies. And the human eye cannot pick up on this. I, myself, with my 720 watts of iTech World lithium batteries, my 1.36 kilowatts of solar on my caravan roof, I'm not gonna see this amount of power that I'm saving. I'm just simply not gonna see it. So even if it is a little bit more than this could be up to 20 amps different daily out of your batteries. You're not gonna see it. You're honestly not. You're not gonna know the difference between these two systems. So this one is definitely better, but like I said, for all the headaches, all the extra converters, you know, your alternator's not gonna work, the higher voltage, it's more dangerous, all these different factors, do I think this result is worth it? Heck no, I don't think at all. I'm staunch for 12 volt systems. And the reason I think that is because in our caravan, last caravan, we bought a very affordable system from iTech World. It cost us about $6,000, which in comparison sounds like a lot of money, but a 24 volt system, say from Victron, might cost you 40 grand. So $6,000 is incredibly affordable, considering you're getting 600 amps of batteries. You can run your aircon, you can run coffee machines, all sorts of stuff. And I've achieved as much as I could ever imagine running out of a caravan. What else could you want? If you can run your aircon on the very hot days, you can run coffee machines, like it's already becoming like glamping. It's very, very luxurious. Why the hell do you need it do all these complex things, add converters, you know, run 24 volt appliances? Like, why do you need to do that? Like, that's the question I have for people that you know, think this is a lot better. No doubt it's a little bit better, and like I've proven today, you know, you're just gonna save a little bit of power. But if you look at it from the scheme of things, if you're achieving everything you want to achieve from this very affordable, easy to understand, easy to fault find system, what more could you want? That's why I've come to the conclusion that I needed to make this video, because I was hearing so many little things, like people coming from caravan manufacturers that are literally forcing this stuff down their throat, saying things like it's cheaper, it's lighter, it's going to save space under your bed or wherever you're mounting your batteries, you know, it's going to last longer, your power, all this stuff. No doubt you're going to save this amount of amps. Like 20 amps in my van is going to last me a whole 10-15 minutes, the amount of power that we use. That's what I mean. I'm not going to see it. So it's people either misleading their customers or just not having an in-depth understanding of how this actually works. And like I said, it doesn't matter if I'm explaining 24 volts or 48 volts, the math is still the same. the math is still exactly the same because they're all multiples of 12 volts. So I could extrapolate this into a 48 volt system and do the maths in 5 minutes, but the principle is there. There's not much difference really when it comes to this stuff. If I was to design a tiny home, I would 100% be putting a 48 volt system in, purely because I can fit so much more solar on the roof and so much more, like I'll have so much more current that I physically won't be able to install big enough cables to run that. So that is the limitation with 12 volts. If I was to make a house or a cabin, I would 100% do this. But for caravans and cars, this is all you need. And it's my staunch opinion that I think that, and it's all backed by the maths and what I've shown you today. So like I said, it really pisses me off when I hear stuff like that, people being misled and their hard-earned cash being spent on things they don't actually need. And all they need sometimes is just someone to sit down with them and show them this. And that's hopefully what I've done today. So if I have taught you anything today, please smash that subscribe button. Please smash the like button. I'll try to keep the 12 volt videos going. Like I said, iTech are having a massive Black Friday sale, up to 90% off store-wide. And with our discount code, you're gonna get free shipping and crazy discount. So make sure you remember SKT. Go buy yourself some iTech World gear while stocks last. Once it all runs out, you're gonna be waiting a long time for the next big sale. So right now is the cheapest time to buy. Hopefully save you a few bucks there. So anyway, drop me a comment below if you learned anything. Let me know if you disagree with anything that I said today. I'm always keen to hear people's opinions. Just make sure it's worth my while. Don't dribble some garbage that you heard from your missus, uncles, brothers Facebook account. Give me some hard-earned facts that are actually backed by the maths. So anyway guys, thanks heaps for watching. Like always, subscribe and we'll see you bloody next time. We've also got a whole catalogue of 12 volt videos explaining a heap of different things. So go on our channel and have a look if you have any other 12 volt questions. Cheers.